Thompson, good to see you again.
Hey, good seeing you. It's been a while. How are you doing, Federico?
Very good, very good. How are things on your side?
Sunny as usual. It's really hot. You know, the kind of weather that you can expect for this really hot and a lot of rain, floods sometimes, but it's become a new norm.
Right,
What can you do?
right. Yeah. The weather is getting crazy. Listen, you know that we have a few minutes time today, something like half an hour to discuss about how are things about factoring on your side of the world. And I remember, Thompson, I told you about that when I was in China back then in 2012 and running an automotive company in Shanghai. Factoring did not exist in the remaining Asian markets. The numbers were pretty much negligent from an international point of view. And less than 10 years later, the South Pacific accounts for something like 25% of global factoring volume, and China has more than half of worldwide factoring companies. What happened
You're
in that
right. You're
period
right.
of time? And more importantly, where is Asia heading to?
You got that right. In 2012, like 10 years ago, when I deliver lectures in China about factoring and the benefits, how it works, blah blah blah. Questions pop up. They were asking questions like what are the differences between LC and open account terms. So these are the really fundamental questions that they ask. But nowadays nobody asks that kind of questions anymore. They're more advanced. They are very innovative. They're actually adapting and taking all these advantages of different programs and asking how do you mix them together. At another level is really is another level of sophistication. Where is Asia heading? It's a good question. The big elephant in Asia, of course, is the world factory, China. As you mentioned, the kind of export figure and the kind of ties in terms of trade with EU and other developed markets like US. A lot of volumes and a lot of trade and flows going on, and there are a couple of big guys like that we can talk about later on. The tech companies, they play a role in the factoring industry and our platforms too. They're very innovative and they have the flow to really test out different products like factoring, domestic invoice financing, e-platform, digitalization, blockchain, all these kind of different products in different segments. So what I think in the summary is they are picking up the pace and they are really quick to adapt and innovative too.
Yeah, I remember that. Again, back then, 10 years back, only insiders in Western countries knew companies like Alibaba, Dingjong, or Tencent. Godzilla Builder did not even exist. And the Chinese companies did not know what factoring nor AI was. Reality now is that Amazon is now abandoning the Chinese market, and reality is also China is the biggest AI user case, and reality is also that Alibaba's fintech and the Ant Group did not place its IPO a few months ago and will now be regulated. Whether that will be, preventing what happened in Germany with Wirecard or Greensill is to be seen. So what role do these big players play today and in the future, of course, according to your insights? What do you think?
These names like Alibaba, like Jingdong, like Tencent, they really rely on these. They are riding the tides of tech and consumerism, I would say, because as you know, everybody knows that they are the Amazon from China. Okay,
Right.
So e-commerce is B2C. So what you see right now is these big tech firms and e-commerce platform. They are really adapting factoring, supply chain finance, all this B2C technology and big data as well. Okay, when I shop from Alibaba, There are a couple of platforms and different payment options that you can opt from. It's really convenient.
Mm,
Even when you're in China or in Hong Kong, when you go to a grocery store, okay, like 7-Eleven, nobody pays any cash. If you pay cash, look at you, oh, you're paying cash? Nobody pays cash. Just take out a phone and then beep, that's it. It's all online. It's really convenient. So I would say the pace of these big techs are picking up technology and using it, marketing it to the consumers and the mass public. The pace is really quick, really fast.
right. I remember I was talking to what I call my Chinese son to Shanghai the other day, and he was telling me, the other day I was trying to pay with my company credit card and in Shanghai, and whereas that is not an issue, um, it seems that they have made already a move into next level, meaning the waiter had to look for the device. He said, "Yeah, I know that we accept credit cards, but I don't know where the reader is." So because everyone is paying with the mobile device, so the credit card has become the past.
Yeah,
And the mobile is the current. It's not the future. It's the state of the art, current technology, uh,
exactly,
and that's amazing.
exactly.
So he had to look for the credit card device and then he didn't know how it worked. So that was
Cash is like 3G's technology. Credit
yes.
card payment is like a 4G, and now they're using 5Gs. So you're right. They are almost skipping 4Gs entirely from 3 to 5 directly. So
Mm,
that's the kind of pace that we're experiencing in Asia, and I think
right.
is is really essential and vital for the players or the stakeholders in EU and to all these developed markets to understand the trend and to really kind of take a look at the pace that what Asia is heading to and how can your customers or clients adapt to that trend.
Mm. So when we look at the numbers and those amazing number of companies that are popping up, um, what are the challenges that you see that financial institutions, especially of course our market, the receivable finance market, faces right now and over the next years? I mean, you've been there and you were teaching at university. So what's been your experience in that, Thompson?
Uh,
10
well,
years
in
ago,
Asia,
for instance. Yeah.
we back then there are only a couple of developed markets in Asia as a whole, Singapore and Japan. We talk about decades or 1 or 2 decades ago. But now I think China and Korea, they are considered developed markets as well. Just take a look at the number of FCI members in China right now. It's over 50 in one country. And all of them are quite active and innovative. However, they are still bipolar in terms of how developed and how advanced these Asian nations are. What I meant is bipolar is that there are emerging markets from Asia, especially South and Southeast Asia. I'll give a couple of examples. I mentioned a couple of developed markets already in Asia, like China, Japan, Singapore, and South Korea, but there are rising ones and emerging ones, like India,
Mm,
Bangladesh, Vietnam. These are all these emerging markets that we can't ignore because who knows? In 10 years, there may be another China or
mm,
similar to the Chinese market, the rise of the Chinese market in terms of factoring and receivables finance. And as I mentioned before, another relevant point is they may jump from 3G technologies and skipping the 4Gs directly to 5Gs because in terms of cost, for these emerging markets to pick up 5Gs entirely and directly, maybe it makes more sense for these markets, like digital factoring, like e-platform, or even
right.
blockchain. But let's go back to what these emerging markets or developed markets what they face. What are their challenges? We can group them into two. the developments. They're at the bottleneck right now. Whether they really go out and adapt and try all these new technologies is one thing, because once you're at that stage, you're quite developed. There is a momentum and there's an inertia that, oh, I can just live off my trade portfolio for the next decade, right? While the emerging ones, the new ones, if I don't move forward, I drowned. Maybe next year or two, I don't have even this kind of product anymore because it's not making a profit or making the kind of return. And the second factor I would say that is whether it's banks and non-bank financial institutions, NBFIs, they themselves are facing different challenges as well. As I mentioned, the banks, they have huge portfolios. So if they don't move forward, they're kind of stuck. And their portfolio will shrink because they're not as innovative and aggressive as the emerging ones.
Okay. All right.
And for the NBFIs, these NBFIs typically are the independent ones. In terms of scale, they are not as big and strong or as the banks or regional banks or even global banks. So their major or main clientele would be SMEs. Margin is better, but these NBFIs or independent factors or firms, they face challenges of issues in several areas. First one is kind of challenging for these independent ones to establish meaningful counterparty limits with their foreign partners. First one. Second one is, how compliance and, all these restrictions going on after the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. So many countries or nations or markets, they have these factors. Independent firms, they face a lot of challenges in this arena because of the scale of operations. The relative cost is much higher than their bigger counterparts or their competitors. If you make 100 million, you spend the same amount of cost in compliance, but when you make 1 million as these SMEs service providers, you spend relatively the same amount in this compliance and all these related costs. It's a very hefty portion, right? So in terms of risk control, in terms of compliance, they need to be really agile and flexible in facing these issues too, especially cost.
So cost is one of the big challenges you're saying because of compliance and risk.
Yes, the other one and the final one is as they are the main clients are SMEs. In terms of getting info and data from them, communication, all these are costly as well. Just give you a few examples, like in Vietnam, in Thailand, in Indonesia, these SME service providers or independent factors, when they need to get information, get some paperwork done, is really not cost effective. Some of them are even farmers, selling coffee beans to abroad. So it's not that efficient to communicate and really work with them compared to the ones in big cities and big clients. One phone call, even all the information, you can just boom, computer or platform, log online, and then you supply all the information. It costs nothing.
All right, but knowing Asia, how fast it goes. I mean, when we talk about the tech giants on one hand that know everything about us, I mean, how much does Alibaba and Tencent know about you in those markets? Because you use the technology, you use it on a daily basis, you use it as a payment means. So they basically have the data already. So do you see that? Do you see it a risk or an opportunity in these tech giants jumping into that space, in the space that we were in, the receivables finance?
Well, actually, the one you mentioned, the Ant Group, that tried the IPO, but it didn't happen. Well, they were in the arena already. It's not a question of when they're trying to get in
It's
already.
not if, it's only when. Okay.
Yeah, it happened already. It's not even when it happened already. So, are you saying that they're competing with banks? Absolutely. Are they in this arena? They are not only e-commerce. They see the opportunity because, as you mentioned, they see the big data. They have all the big data already. They know the pattern. They have a platform in terms of e-commerce, payment. They have the necessary components to compete directly with banks or giants. So they're in. It's not a question of when or if, is that they're in already. But how do we compete with them? Because they have a lot of resources, so to speak. Can the independent ones or small ones compete with them? Yes, I think I see, and each market has the niche. So a lot of these new independent factors in emerging markets, they are really quick they see an opportunity and they see, well, maybe my exporting clients from the farming industry, well, it's better for them and more effective to communicate and get information with them using cell phone. Maybe they don't have a computer, using cell phone, develop an app, and you have all the information they can supply: invoice numbers, terms, okay, customer info, the buyer's info, even history you can verify. Just have an app. Develop an app is not as costly as a bank writing up a specific or proprietary platform for them, right? It's just an app. So these are the advantages that I think these SME service providers can really compete with the big giants.
All right. Right. And how is the, I mean, you know that in Europe we take a lot of care about data protection, GDPR, and so on and so forth, which others say prevent the development and also diffusion of technology. My understanding is that in Asian markets, GDPR is not that strict as it is here. Do you think that this is one of the reasons why technology is just jumping up and taking the pace it's taking?
Well, it's a good question too, because you asked about, you are looking to the future already, the vision. One thing that I see a pattern is developed markets like EU and US in terms of market size and the financial sophistication, or even in this digital arena. The EU and the US side, they are putting up all these restrictions or guidelines, so to speak, in terms of data protection. I think the Asian market will follow, because once you get to that mass, people will start asking, hey, am I safe? Is my account safe if I use e-payment? Right? What if I pay this to a new seller, and then one week afterwards my credit card has like 50,000 transactions on it? This would be my concerns as well. This is not a question whether it's a European or Asian. It's a matter of a cyber user, right? So I guess these regulations, a more regulated environment will follow, but the main question is, how do we pick a right partner to provide a secure solution to ride this tide of the rising of emerging markets? How can we work with these emerging markets? I think this is more meaningful. As an advanced user from the EU, I think your clients can in these difficult times to travel, can leverage this platform or this opportunity with efcom and FCI. We can link them up. It's not possible for them to meet by now, or very difficult, but meeting online, like us having a talk, a no chat like today, should be easy. And I believe that there would be a lot of synergies if we, efcom and FCI work out for them and help them connect. It would make sense for them.
Right. Coming back to what you were saying about the problems faced. I mean, the GDPR on one hand, and but maybe it's good. I think about the West and the East. The West always tries to teach others what's good and bad, what works and what doesn't work. So my question would be to you: what can we still, if at all, teach Asian markets? But more importantly, what can we learn now from Asian markets in the West? I mean, you mentioned something. I mentioned to you the GDPR, and you should say, yeah, it's not all bad, because at the end of the day, we all, East or West, want to have our safety and security on our data and stuff. So this kind of thinking make me think, okay, so what can we learn from the Asian markets that are developing so fast right now? Because I think this is very important to our audience now in Germany and Europe that are listening to our conversation. Do you have any ideas?
I guess both markets, these are very different markets. One is export oriented, the other one is import oriented. EU is more advanced in terms of a few areas, financial innovation, product wise. But from the Asian perspective, they as they are emerging, these needs have never been heard before. So I think it's more meaningful if they can share all these two markets, the stakeholders can connect and then share just 30 minutes, 60 minutes online, and they have a lot to learn from each other. The needs, the appetite, there are then also opportunities to be identified. If you don't talk, if you don't communicate, if you don't connect, you never find out. You just guess. So I would really suggest that your the audience today or the attendees today really, how do they position themselves? What are their needs and what are they looking for in these markets? List them down and then just try to find out. If you're looking for a partner, export factor or new ones from the emerging markets, maybe we can help. Just set them up. There will be synergies.
Do you have any particular example where you would say this is something that's worked out for us super good, and we can recommend to our fellows in Europe?
A lot has happened in the past 2 years, starting from 2020 or end of 2019. We all know that a lot of lockdowns and especially these really brought a sudden shift in terms of mentality to the supply chain decision makers on a global scale. Your clients, they have a lot of experiences with the Chinese market already for the past decade, I'm sure. There's a shift potentially in the supply chain of goods and merchandising going on in Asia. The World Factory, as we know, what happened last year? A lot of merchandisers, they're thinking, am I really putting all my eggs in one basket? Well, of course, the answer to that question is really obvious. I shouldn't, because if I were the merchandiser and I find out, a single most important supplying market is not working right now, is in lockdown for 6 months. I don't have anything to source. I don't have anything to sell in my supermarket. I'm in trouble because I failed at my job. So does it make sense for me to really consider an alternative with the proximity of the major supplier, while it makes sense for me to really source out and spread out my risk? Don't put all my eggs in one basket. So what is the most prominent contender in this question is, I think it's the emerging markets, Southeast Asia and South Asia. So I think to your question, we have to give more attention to this new market. Bangladesh, India, Southeast Asia, including Thailand, Vietnam. You've heard already, Samsung, all these big manufacturers, they are slowly, they're thinking the same thing. They used to have like 100 factories in China or established markets. Should they really take a look and study and then spread out and put some more footprints in the region?
Mm.
Possibly that question is, that answer is yes.
Yeah, we see that with the numbers, and when I see the trade between the European Union and all Asia, I mean it only knows one direction, and that's up. We're talking about almost 1 trillion euro on trade between the regions, which is a significant number. Now, I guess trade finance plays an important role in all that. And you were mentioning the emerging countries, the big ones. We know, of course, China makes a big chunk of that. But if we take all those emergings and the smaller to become bigger organizations, how do you think can FCI, the organization you represent in this case, help in this case? Because trade finance is also part of our business.
There's a very good example that we can follow. As we discussed before, 10 years ago in China, we're still discussing the differences between LC and over-the-counter term sales. But nowadays, I think the emerging markets, in South and Southeast Asia, they're asking the same questions, exactly the same pattern. So I think what FCI and platform providers and service providers in the stakeholders in this industry can help is education. Really, number one topic that we should focus on right now is how we provide education and support to these emerging markets. Once they get the grip, the pace they will pick up may be even quicker than the ones before, the predecessors. So how do we, FCI is right now working with a couple of state banks and development banks in the region and semi-governmental organizations to deliver our education, tailor-made education programs regarding factoring, receivables finance, supply chain finance to all these nations, the emerging ones. Because we believe, FCI believes that this is vital for the success. If they don't, there's an old saying in the sales industry for bankers, you can't sell what you don't know. You have to understand the product first before you can sell it.
Absolutely.
Right. So these bankers, we are making huge progress in terms of partnering with the state banks and development banks and locals to really deliver to them, the best education and support we can.
You mentioned something very important, and that's education, which I think is, like you said, vital for development and the successive growth. How eager and hungry do you see those markets for knowing, understanding all these new, means of financing that FCI and we as a technology provider bring with us? Do you think they're open right now for that? They're ready to go?
These bankers, they are eager for knowledge, and it's very similar with the Chinese market before. Not only the bankers, but also the regulators, policymakers, in different legal or different landscape, in different stakeholders, they need the education simultaneously, not only the user and the promoters, but also, as I mentioned, the policymakers, because they're working hand in hand. And you can't go on, you can't just walk with one leg. You have to have a suitable system, whether it's online, whether it's legal, to make available this, a suitable environment for the product to grow and expand. So if you do not have relevant guidelines with a certain product, it's almost impossible and very challenging for the commercial world, like the banking industry, to develop and to put out products, because they don't know the boundaries. You need to give them some guidelines and directions. So when we work with the state banks, I see a lot of stakeholders from different landscape, different categories, different industries. They are paying a lot of attention, and they like to join our education programs as well.
I will ask you one more question, one last question, and that is if you were an entrepreneur in the trade finance industry right now, where would you go right now in Asia? Which region, which place, which particular country, or maybe niche in the market? What would you say is the thing to go now?
First is location. If you're an expat from EU, language is one thing. How adaptable you are, it really depends on the environment that you jump in. A lot of expats would choose Singapore first because it's a hub of trade for the whole South Asian nations, Southeast Asian as well. In terms of regulations, infrastructure, you can pick even better one from that Asian hub. Language won't be a problem. Food won't be a problem. Living standards won't be a problem. A lot of innovative and fintechs are rising from that location because they have that country. The policy actually is favoring and giving favors to the development of fintechs. In terms of trade, in the middle of all these Asian and emerging exporting countries, so traveling to each one and getting a pulse of all these markets is almost like a snap of fingers. So for e-commerce, for entrepreneurs in terms of trading, international trade, well, if I were you, if I were them, I would pick Singapore.
Cool. I will think about that.
Thompson. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and it's been wonderful talking to you again. And I hope our audience also learned as much as I learned from you. We may now proceed to any question and answers afterwards. So let's stay tuned.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Nice catching up with you.